They say time heals all wounds. It's a lovely sentiment, isn't it? A comforting little phrase people whisper over lukewarm tea when your world has been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. But let me tell you, time doesn't heal. It doesn't patch. It doesn't mend. It simply buries. It piles on years like layers of cold, heavy earth until the raw, gaping wound is so far beneath the surface, you can almost pretend it isn't there. For 13 years, I lived on that buried grief. But a funny thing happens when you suddenly come into a fortune. It's like an earthquake. It shakes the ground so violently that all those buried things, all those forgotten horrors, come ripping back to the surface. And sometimes they bring the monsters who buried them in the first place right back to your door. That's what I was thinking about, standing in the marble-floored entryway of the house I'd bought myself as a retirement gift, a house my son had never seen. I was looking at the woman on my porch, Samantha, my daughter-in-law, the architect of my 13-year exile. She hadn't changed much, which was a testament to expensive skincare and a life lived without the kind of worry that carves lines into a person's face. Her blonde hair was still a perfect, sleek curtain framing a heart-shaped face. Her eyes, the colour of a summer sky, were wide and glistening with what a stranger might mistake for sincerity. I knew better. I knew those eyes were weapons, capable of feigning any emotion necessary to achieve her objective. Today, their objective was clearly me. "Katherine," she breathed, her voice a soft, practiced melody of contrition. "Oh, Katherine, can we talk?" Behind her, parked at the curb of my quiet, tree-lined street, was a sleek black Mercedes that looked brand new. A small, anxious-looking boy I didn't recognize was in the passenger seat, staring at his phone. There was no sign of my son, David, or my granddaughter, Lily. 13 years. 4,745 days. That's how long it had been since I'd heard her voice, since I'd seen that face anywhere but in the background of a tagged photo on social media. 13 years since my son, my only child, the boy I raised on my own after his father died, had looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer welcome in his life. And now, here she was. Not a week after the sale of my company was announced in the Boston Business Journal. The timing was, shall we say, impeccable. My story doesn't begin with hate. It begins, as the most tragic stories often do, with love. A fierce, all-consuming love for my son, David. His father, Michael, was a good man, a firefighter who died a hero when David was just 8. I was left with a mountain of grief and a little boy with his father's kind eyes. I vowed then and there that he would want for nothing. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I started a little side business from my kitchen making artisanal jams and preserves from old family recipes. I called it Catherine's Kitchen. It was my lifeline, the thing that paid for David's braces, his college tuition, and eventually, my sanity. David was my world. We were a team. We navigated parent-teacher conferences, broken hearts, and his questionable teenage fashion choices together. When he graduated from college with a degree in business, I was the proudest mother on the planet. When he told me he had met someone, I was thrilled for him. And then he brought Samantha home. On the surface, she was perfect. Beautiful, charming, educated. She doted on David, hanging on his every word. She complimented my home, raved about my cooking, and called me Mom from the second date. It felt fast. But David was so happy, so utterly besotted, that I pushed my unease aside. This is what you want for your child, I told myself. Happiness. They married in a lavish ceremony that I helped pay for. A fact Samantha made sure to mention to guests with a dismissive little laugh, as if it were a charming anecdote about the quaint, simple mother-in-law. That was the first little crack in the facade. Little comments, subtle digs, always disguised as jokes. When I'd offer a piece of advice David had asked for, she'd smile sweetly and say, "Oh, Katherine, that's so old-fashioned. We're doing things the modern way now." When I bought a savings bond for their future children, she thanked me with a tight smile, and I later overheard her telling her mother on the phone it was adorably clueless, and that they'd cash it in for a weekend trip to Napa. She began to isolate him, slowly, methodically. His old friends were immature. His hobbies were a waste of time. His weekly dinners with me became monthly, then bi-monthly, and soon they were only for special occasions. The calls dwindled. Every time I did see him, he seemed muted, as if he were constantly checking his words, his reactions, against an invisible script written by his wife. The true nightmare began when my granddaughter, Lily, was born. I was overjoyed. A new generation, a little girl to spoil and love. I imagined baking cookies with her, reading her stories, being the grandma my own mother was to David. Samantha had other ideas. My visits were policed. "Don't hold her like that, Katherine. You'll spoil her. Please wash your hands again. You were just outside. We're on a very strict schedule, so you can only stay for an hour." I bought a beautiful hand-carved crib as a gift. It was returned. "It doesn't match our minimalist aesthetic," Samantha explained without a hint of apology. Instead, they had a registry filled with ludicrously expensive Scandinavian furniture. The final, shattering blow came on Lily's first birthday. I had spent weeks knitting a beautiful pink blanket, weaving my love into every stitch. I arrived at their immaculate, joyless house, gift in hand. The party was in full swing, filled with Samantha's chic, wealthy friends. I felt like a country mouse at a royal ball. I found David in the kitchen and gave him a hug. He felt stiff, distant. I gave him the blanket for Lily. He smiled, a ghost of his old smile, and said, "Thanks, Mom. It's beautiful." Later, I was walking past their bedroom to use the guest bathroom when I heard Samantha's voice, sharp and angry. "What am I supposed to do with this? It's handmade, David. It's probably covered in germs. It looks like something from a thrift store." My God, can't she just buy something from the registry like a normal person? Then I heard my son's voice, and this was the part that broke me. "I know, Sam. I know. Just put it in the back of the closet. I'll deal with her. I'll tell her we need some space." Deal with me, like I was a problem to be managed, an inconvenience. I didn't wait to hear more. I walked out of that party without saying goodbye, the sound of their friends' laughter echoing behind me like a funeral dirge. I drove home, the knitted blanket still clutched in my hands, my vision blurred by a torrent of tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed in years. The next day, David called. It wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. "Mum," he said, his voice cold and rehearsed, "Sam and I feel that you're being a little overbearing. You're not respecting our boundaries as parents. We think it's best if we take a break. We need some space to be our own family." "A break?" I choked out. "David." She threw away my gift. I heard her. There was a pause. "You were eavesdropping. See, this is what I mean. You're always undermining her. You're trying to turn me against my own wife." It was so absurd, so perfectly twisted, that I was speechless. She had taken my love for him and reframed it as control, my concern as criticism, my very presence as a threat. And he believed her. He chose her. "When you're ready to respect our marriage and our choices," he said, his voice the final nail in my coffin, "then maybe we can talk. Until then, please don't call. We'll reach out." He hung up. And for 13 years, the phone never rang. The first year was a blur of unimaginable pain. Every holiday was a fresh hell. I'd see families laughing in the park and feel a physical ache in my chest. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents to Lily, They were always returned, unopened. I tried calling, but my number was blocked. I drove by their house once, just hoping for a glimpse of my granddaughter, and saw Samantha watching me from the window, her expression one of pure, venomous triumph. I never went back. After that first year of wallowing, something inside me shifted. A spark of anger ignited in the cold ashes of my grief. I had one other child, my business. Katherine's kitchen. It had always been a modest success, a comfortable living. Now I decided it would be my salvation. I poured every ounce of my being into it. The hours I would have spent being a grandmother, I spent perfecting recipes. The energy I would have used to chase a son who didn't want me, I used to chase new clients. I expanded from jams to gourmet sauces and marinades. I hired my first full-time employee, a wonderful woman named Maria, who became my closest friend and confidant. I got our products into local farmers' markets, then specialty grocery stores. I took out a business loan and built a small commercial kitchen. The business grew, year after painful year. It was my reason to get out of bed. It was the one thing in my life I had complete control over. While Samantha was busy erasing me from my son's life, I was busy building an empire, one jar of strawberry rhubarb jam at a time. I didn't do it for revenge, not at first. I did it to survive. 10 years in, we were a regional success story. Our products were in stores all over New England. I was featured in magazines. I was no longer just Katherine Hayes, the forgotten mother. I was Katherine Hayes, the founder and CEO of Katherine's Kitchen. The work was my armor. Then, about 6 months ago, the impossible happened. A massive food conglomerate, a household name, approached me with an offer to buy my company. Their initial offer was staggering. We negotiated for months. My lawyer, a sharp young man who reminded me a little of David, fought for every penny. The final offer was $15 million. The day I signed the papers, I went home to my quiet, empty house and sat in my armchair with a glass of expensive scotch I didn't particularly like. I was a multi-millionaire. I had done it. I had built something from nothing, something that would outlast me. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, all I felt was a profound, hollow ache. Who was I going to share this with? The only person whose pride would have truly mattered had been convinced I was a monster. The story of the sale ran in the Boston Business Journal a week ago. Local woman sells homemade jam company for 8-figure sum. They ran a picture of me, smiling, standing in front of the factory I had built. I looked successful. I looked happy. I suppose, in a way, I was. I was proud of what I'd accomplished, but success is a cold comfort on a lonely night. Which brought me back to my doorstep, to Samantha's perfectly made-up face and her perfectly rehearsed apology. "Can we talk?" she repeated, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. I stepped back from the door, a gesture of invitation, not of welcome. "Come in," I said, my voice flat. She walked into my home, her eyes sweeping over everything. The art on the walls, the expensive furniture, the view of the ocean from my living room window. It was an appraisal, not an appreciation. She was calculating. "Your house is stunning," she said, her voice laced with a thick layer of envy. "What do you want, Samantha?" I asked, cutting straight through the pleasantries. I had no time for them. She'd stolen enough of my time already. She flinched. Then her face crumpled into a mask of sorrow. "I'm here to apologize, Katherine, for everything. I was young. I was insecure. I felt like I was competing with you for David's affection, and I handled it horribly. I pushed you away, and I convinced him to do it too. It's the biggest regret of my life." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a framed photo. It was of Lily. She was about 14 now, with my dark hair and David's kind eyes. She was beautiful. My heart constricted with a pain so sharp it took my breath away. "She asks about you," Samantha said, her voice thick with fake emotion. "All the time. I've told her what a wonderful woman her grandmother is, and how it was my fault, all my fault, that we're not in your life. David misses you so much. He's ashamed. He doesn't know how to face you after all this time." I stared at her, my mind a cold, clear machine. Every word was a lie, every gesture was a performance. 13 years of absolute soul-crushing silence, and now, a week after my net worth exploded, she shows up with a tale of regret and a conveniently placed photo of the granddaughter she knew was my weak spot. It was insulting. It was audacious. And it was, I had to admit, a bold play. "Where is David?" I asked. "He's at work," she said quickly. "He wanted to come, but he was afraid you'd slam the door in his face. I told him I had to try. For Lily. For our family. We want you back, Katherine. We need you back." Need. That was the operative word. I looked at her, at the expensive handbag, the perfectly manicured nails, the subtle but unmistakable signs of a life lived well beyond its means. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about family. This was a business transaction. They had run out of money, and I had just become the lottery they desperately needed to win. A plan began to form in my mind. A cold, quiet, and utterly ruthless plan. For 13 years, she had played a game with my life, with my heart. Fine. Now it was my turn to play. "I see," I said, allowing a flicker of something, hope, forgiveness, to cross my face. I watched her eyes. She saw it, and a tiny, almost imperceptible gleam of triumph appeared in their depths. She thought she had me. "It's been a long time, Samantha," I said, my voice softening. "I've missed my family more than you can ever know. Of course I want to see you. I want to see David. And I want to meet my granddaughter." The relief that washed over her face was so profound it was almost comical. She had done it. She had opened the door to the vault. "Oh, Katherine," she gushed, stepping forward to hug me. I stood stiffly in her embrace, the cloying scent of her expensive perfume filling my senses. It smelled like deceit. "This is the best day. David will be so happy. We'll have you over for dinner. This Friday? We can finally be a family again." "I'd like that very much," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "This Friday sounds perfect." The week leading up to the dinner was a masterclass in manipulation on her part. I received a bouquet of lilies with a card signed, "Can't wait to finally know you, Grandma. Love, Lily." I got texts from an unknown number, David's new number, saying, "Mum, I'm so sorry. I can't wait to see you." It was all so perfectly orchestrated. I spent the week making my own arrangements. I called my lawyer. I called my financial advisor. I set things in motion. Maria, my friend and former manager, thought I was losing my mind. "Katherine, you can't be serious," she said over coffee. "After everything they did, she's a snake and he's a coward. They just want your money." "I know that, Maria," I replied, stirring my cappuccino, "and that's exactly what I'm counting on." Friday night arrived. I drove myself to their house. It was in a gated community, a sprawling McMansion that was impressive from the outside, but felt cold and sterile on the inside. It was a house built to impress, not to be lived in. David opened the door. He looked older. There were lines of stress around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his smile didn't quite reach them. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of shame and hope. "Mum," he said, his voice thick. He hugged me, and for a fleeting second he felt like my son again, but it passed. The boy I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who had stood by and watched his wife destroy me. And then I saw her. Lily. She was standing shyly in the hallway. She had my picture in her hands, the one from the magazine. She was the image of me at that age, but with her father's gentle spirit in her eyes. My heart, which I thought had turned to stone, cracked open just a little. "Grandma Katherine?" she asked, her voice soft. I knelt down, my old knees protesting. "Hello, my sweet girl," I said, my voice catching for the first time. This was real. This girl was real. The only innocent soul in this whole wretched affair. I hugged her, and she hugged me back, her small arms wrapping around my neck. I breathed in the scent of her hair and fought back tears. This was what they had stolen from me. Not the holidays, not the phone calls, but this precious, irreplaceable connection. Dinner was a performance. Samantha was the gracious hostess, David was the repentant son, and Lily was the happy, curious granddaughter. They talked about their lives, carefully editing out any mention of hardship. They talked about their wonderful vacations, Lily's expensive private school, the new Mercedes. It was a projection of immense wealth and success. A lie from start to finish. I played my part. I was the forgiving matriarch. I asked about Lily's school, complimented Samantha's, catered, cooking, and listened as David talked about his successful investment firm. After dinner, Samantha suggested Lily show me her room. It was a perfect, princess-themed confection, filled with toys and gadgets. We sat on her bed, and she showed me her drawings. She was a talented artist. For half an hour I allowed myself to just be a grandmother. I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in 13 years. "Grandma," Lily said, looking at me with serious eyes. "Mummy says you're very rich now." The spell was broken, out of the mouths of babes. "I sold my company, sweetie," I said gently. "I worked very hard for a long time." "She said now that you're back, we won't have to worry anymore," she continued, oblivious. "And Daddy won't have to be so sad and angry on the phone all the time." There it was. The truth, delivered by a child who didn't know she was delivering it. I hugged her goodnight, my heart a block of ice once more. I walked downstairs to find Samantha and David in the living room, sipping wine, wearing expectant smiles. It was time for the final act. "It was a lovely evening," I began, sitting in the armchair opposite them. "Lily is a wonderful girl. You've done a good job." "We're so glad you came," Samantha gushed. "This is a new beginning for all of us." David nodded, swirling the wine in his glass. "Mum, about everything. I know Zori isn't enough. I was weak. I let I let things get out of hand. I hope in time you can forgive me." "Forgiveness is a powerful thing," I said cryptically, "and so is family. You're right. This is a new beginning, and I want to help." Their eyes lit up in perfect, greedy unison. "I've been thinking a lot this week," I continued, my voice calm and steady. "I have more money than I could ever spend, and I have no one to share it with. My only family is right here, in this room. So I've made a decision. I've instructed my lawyer to set up a trust, a substantial one. It will be in David's name, and it will ensure that you and Lily are taken care of for the rest of your lives." Samantha's jaw literally dropped. David looked like he was going to weep with relief. "Mum, I don't know what to say," he stammered. "You don't have to say anything," I said, smiling warmly. "There is one condition, however. It's just a formality for the lawyers. They need a recorded statement from both of you, acknowledging the past estrangement and our reconciliation, just to ensure there are no future challenges to the trust. It's silly, I know, but they insist." I pulled a small, sleek digital voice recorder from my purse. "I can just put this on the coffee table. All you have to do is state your names and just talk. Talk about the last 13 years, the misunderstanding, and how we're all moving forward now, for the record." They exchanged a look. It was a strange request, but with the promise of millions hanging in the balance, they weren't about to question it. "Of course," Samantha said, her voice dripping with honey. "Anything you need, Katherine." I pressed the record button, the small red light blinking like a single malevolent eye. "Just speak freely," I said. "I'm just going to run to the restroom." I walked out of the room, my heart pounding against my ribs. I didn't go to the restroom. I went down the hall and stood in the shadows where I could see them, but they couldn't see me. I had my phone in my hand, connected via Bluetooth to the recorder. I wasn't just recording. I was listening. Live. For a moment, they were silent. Then I heard Samantha giggle. "Can you believe that worked?" she whispered, her voice no longer soft and contrite, but sharp and triumphant. "The old fool. She actually bought it, hook, line, and sinker." My blood ran cold. "Sam, shut up, it's recording," David hissed. "Oh, relax," she scoffed. "She's practically deaf. Acknowledging the estrangement? Gladly. 13 years of peace and quiet, and now we get the payday." "I was young and insecure." She mimicked her earlier performance, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I was brilliant, is what I was. I knew from day one she was the type who would want to control everything. I had to cut her out before she could poison you against me." "She's still my mother," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's our ticket out of this mess, David. Is that what you want to tell her? That your genius investment firm is about to go under? That we're 2 months from foreclosure on this house? That you owe your business partner, Frank, over $200,000 that you borrowed from the company accounts? Because that's our reality." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Embezzlement. Frank Miller was his business partner. I knew Frank. He was a decent man who had trusted my son. "Frank's getting suspicious," David muttered. "He's talking about an audit." "Let him audit," Samantha laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "By the time he finds anything, we'll have Katherine's money. We'll pay him back and tell him to get lost. We'll be set for life. All we had to do was stomach one dinner with the sanctimonious old hag." Honestly, the way she was looking at Lily, you'd think she owned her. It was pathetic. I had heard enough. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The last vestiges of my foolish, lingering hope for my son died in that hallway. There was nothing left to salvage. There was only justice. I walked back into the room. They both jumped, their faces a mask of false sincerity. Samantha reached over and switched off the recorder. "All done," she chirped, smiling brightly. I didn't smile back. I simply held up my phone. The Bluetooth symbol was glowing on the screen. "So am I," I said quietly. Their smiles vanished. The color drained from David's face. Samantha's eyes darted from my phone to my face, comprehension dawning in a wave of pure terror. What is that?" she stammered. "It's a live feed," I said, my voice as cold and hard as granite. "To a second recorder I have in my purse, and to my lawyer's email. He received the audio file about 30 seconds ago, the one where you call me a sanctimonious old hag and confess to embezzling $200,000 from your business partner." Samantha let out a choked gasp. David looked like he was going to be physically ill. "No," he whispered. "Mum, no, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly now," I said, standing up. "I understand everything. There will be no trust fund. There will be no money. There will be no new beginning." I turned to David, my heart aching not with sadness, but with a profound and bottomless pity for the weak, foolish man he had become. "I suggest you call Frank Miller. Get ahead of it. Maybe he'll be merciful if you confess before he finishes his audit." I walked towards the door. Samantha, galvanized by sheer desperation, ran in front of me, blocking my path. Her face was a terrifying rictus of fury and panic. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, her mask of civility completely gone. "After everything we did to get you back, we let you see Lily. You owe us." "Owe you?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "I owe you nothing. You built a cage for my son, and he walked into it willingly. You stole my granddaughter from me. You tried to play me for a fool, but you miscalculated. You thought 13 years of grief made me weak. You were wrong. It made me indestructible." I stepped around her and walked out the door. I didn't look back. As I got into my car, I could hear her screaming at David, the sounds of their perfect life imploding. The karma, when it came, was swift and brutal. Frank Miller, armed with my recording, didn't need an audit. He went straight to the authorities. David was arrested for embezzlement. To save himself from a longer sentence, he testified against Samantha, revealing she had been the one pressuring him, masterminding their elaborate web of lies and debt. The press had a field day with it. Wealthy couple preyed on elderly mother in $1 million scam. They lost everything. The house was seized to pay back creditors. The Mercedes was repossessed. Samantha, facing her own charges of conspiracy and fraud, filed for divorce, trying to paint herself as another one of David's victims. But the recording was undeniable. Her greed and cruelty were laid bare for the world to hear. David served 8 months in a low-security prison. He lost his career, his reputation, and his family. Samantha got probation, but she was a social pariah. No one would hire her. The last I heard, she was living with her mother, working a retail job at the mall. And Lily? That was the hardest part. The courts appointed a guardian ad litem. I provided a stable, loving home. After a lengthy and painful process, I was granted full custody of my granddaughter. She lives with me now, in my big house by the ocean. It's no longer quiet and empty. It's filled with her laughter, the smell of my baking, and the sound of her pencil scratching as she draws at the kitchen table. David gets out next month. He's written me letters, full of the remorse he should have shown 13 years ago. He wants to see Lily. He wants to see me. He wants to start over. I don't know if I can ever truly forgive him. What he did wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal of the deepest kind. But when I look at Lily, I see his eyes. I see the little boy I raised, the one who existed before Samantha's poison took root. Time doesn't heal all wounds, I know that now, but it does give you perspective. The $15 million didn't bring me happiness, it brought me the truth. And the truth, as painful as it was, set me free. My revenge wasn't the money, or their downfall. My revenge is this. Every morning I wake up and make my granddaughter breakfast. I get to be the grandmother I always dreamed of being. I am living the life they tried to steal from me, and I am doing it with strength, with love, and on my own terms. They are buried under the weight of their own choices, while I, finally, am standing in the sun.